Delivered in 4 parts, this new book from Anne Kellas might possibly offer us 4 ways of saying goodbye. All the parts could signal the 4-way revolving door of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. I suspect, however, that the 4 parts reflect 4 impulses or 4 time periods in the writing of the book. But what I find upon reading and rereading it is a book that moves along crisscross trails of observation, memory, silence, and grief. The first section are poems of her own orphaning through the deaths of her parents. In the second are repeated winter scenes, along with the growing presence of silence. And silence might be the most frequently used noun in the book. I was tempted to do a count of silent and silence, but you can do your own count. I'm reminded that those great silent, whited out landscapes of snow were the paintings that first brought to many people's notice the beauty of Claude Monet's art in the late 1880s. Kellas works silence like a snowfield into her poems as a presence that creates possibilities. In the third part, silence ushers in angels of terror and beauty. They stand mute in the poems, as powerfully strange as the solitary angels of Wim Wenders in Wings of Desire. The fourth part returns to the grief of losing her son at 21. But these poems, some years and a book on from that death, are perhaps less lament and more revelation. Anne Kellas has an exquisite feel for the way a single word or a brief phrase can be dropped into a poem's white space to surprising effect. And if Tasmania is that part of Australia that looks towards the white spaces of Antarctica, then the opening poem, the prologue, sets us on an icy sea of enigmatic symbols in a world of extremes, acutely focused and reduced. I want to read that poem. It goes, "Probably I'll go that way by sea, in a ship that sails in the night and drops lifeboats like lifts down lift shafts onto storm seas below. The sea will be glass with icebreakers for flags. If you look starboard, you'll see ink rays, sparks. My travel will be fast. I will be lightning." Kellas later writes of her mother, who could once read the mind of clouds, that she has been placed in the machine for the reduction of complexity. And of course, we all long for such a machine, even though we are terrified of it. The paradoxical, shimmering images in these poems do the work of understanding, grieving, and remembering in ways that are beyond being paraphrasable. Oblivion and knowledge seem to coexist. Anne Kellas's poems carry some of the enigmatic, wintry grace of a Wallace Stevens, but not his nervousness. There's something of the calm of a Nancy Wood in her work, though the wisdom, and there is wisdom everywhere in the book, is not nearly as easily resolved. Silence is this poetry's companion. While clouds and sunsets become messages, mist and wind are languages, shaped by the silence of mountains and missing birds. In her poem to silence, titled On Hearing the Bells of St. John's, Newtown, what she hears from the brickworks, from the church bells, from birdsong is an angelus of sorts that called us into silence. The visual arts and the sweep of history are as present as birds and angels. At the centre of these influences is the iconic 1920 Paul Klee image, Angelus Novus, long known as an image of powerlessness in the face of a catastrophic present, blown violently into a future of sorrow heaped on sorrow, heaped on sorrow, as Kellas writes. Kellas asks of this angel, in the longest and most heartfelt poem of the book, how could you be so beautiful and so soundless behind glass? Recalling that opening poem's glass sea and its futile icebreakers. In what country are we now? Is this the world? Is this the world? The poet asks of the angel. And yes, we are in a country where this poet can say, in the silence, a mist, the long breath of the earth, curled upward and sideways and down in a green sleeve of summer along the riverbank. Congratulations, Anne Kellas, and I'm looking forward to hearing you read as many poems as you can from this book.
Kevin, for your beautiful words and your deep understanding. And I think any poets could only wish for being understood. And I feel really understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne.
And I'd like to thank Liquid Amber for their wonderful help in this production. And also Giles for his image of that the cover was built from. And I'd also like to thank my friends who've supported me through my writing career, and many of them are here in the audience, and you're all precious to me. I'll begin with a poem that started off as an attempt to write about my son, our son, but the poem just went somewhere else. And it's called A Document of Clouds. To pin down something as invisible as light was doomed, you'd think. Something so loosely bound with threads of night, foxed edges dissolving into motes. Yet here it was, a document of clouds. I'd been afraid of entering their atmosphere in case I reached the evaporation point of cloud. Cloud, not the cloud world of shipping containers and the loading of documents to and fro, but the free space above. I wanted to see through them, those large floating lenses looking down on us. I wanted to know how it felt to be completely oblivious, blind to the human condition. To understand, it would be enough just to understand. In between their halting rhythmic lines lay the sorrow plain, an area of thin blue, ordered but wild, not tied to scale or key. Below, the dry hands of trees stretched for 1,000 miles. The spiral-bound forest gardens brought to mind the failed idea of kings. I could see you lying in a darkened room, a woman in Japanese robes, patterned, two-dimensional like cards, heavy as steel armor, guarded you as you slept. She hushed me and kept me from touching your ice-white face. It was your fear I had wanted to visit, but it had left you as soon as you slept. Where, I had wanted to ask, were you traveling? High, you said, high, higher than clouds you can see. I'll be dreaming there, don't you worry. I left you then, believing those thin lines were taut enough to carry you down, or was it up, through the thermals. Where you went, no one followed.
Excuse me, dear Anne. We've just had some comments in the chat. Could you just be a little louder, perhaps?
Oh, sure.
Yes, we're desperate to hear you.
The second part of the book is called Thresholds, and I see them as thresholds of understanding or thresholds of peril. Blackbird. The enduring song of a blackbird in the rain, just before the rain or just after. The lilt and rhythm with its soft pauses rests on treble clefs of leaves, sings true, his father's song each year. Through the window watching, I resist the long white winter light of absence and people it with trees. Let the air between their barren staves fine-tune the birdsong to a middle C and breathe. A scroll of sunset cloud unfurls its messages from foreign gods. Lets fall soft parachutes of rain. Blackbird is silent, buttressed in his own green-black leaves. Silent mountain, this frail island, stolid in the morning light, grips its ancient forests to the cliffs, lets sea wind harrow its bones. Rice-thin paper colours stray over its canvas in willowy lines, mapping the land with its invisible waterfalls and gashes of black and white plant life. One bird calls across the ocean. A cross-hatching of black lies on the grey waves. A kind of ocean lace for pelicans to dine on. A bird harps on one point. A bird harps on a point. The dawn comes, but where are the sparrows I used to ignore, and why did the silence wake me? A drift of clouds stood still above the trees. There was always the mountain. On its summit, snow fell like haiku in contained lines, filling blank spaces with fingers of ice. I swept up some snow in my hands to make sure I was human, that it was really snow. Its cold drove through me its want for images, its hunger for soul, its devouring breath. It drove through me until I wept, drove through me its stanza rose, its London red bus of long ago, its purple satin ball gown of star sky. This next one is called The Mute Dove of Distant Places, and I discovered that phrase in Robert Alter's wonderful translations of the Psalms, where he keeps the cadence of the King James Bible, but corrects all the hilarious errors of translation. He's a fine scholar of ancient languages. And in the Psalm 56, the psalmist was told, sometimes it says like a psalm for David. This one says a psalm to be sung like the mute dove of distant places. Now sing, the psalmist was told, like the mute dove of distant places. Tell the story of the world or life or the past, maybe just the story of right now. But the dove was careless. It was also very careful, full of trust and distrust. It was quiet for a long time. I sat there listening to its quiet. Its quiet was large and fulsome, comfortable like pillows, like my mother. The dove was lonely, and the blackbird had stopped singing. A small wind stirred the trees' new leaves. The dove eyed me silently, then forgot me, flew off. I'm stuck here listening for the blackbird, waiting for the meaning of a dove to be delivered like an egg in a nest, unopened. This poem takes us right here to Newtown, where I'm speaking from. On hearing the bells of St. John's, Newtown, The rolling bells 5 minutes out of town, all out of sync with Greenwich, are still. No midnight toll of 12 that in my sleep's 13 rings across the streets. No hollow gong at dawn, no pealing sound in storms, no intervals to count the hours. Who reads a book of hours or marks this place in time? Something soft that sang to silence in a lordly way aloud is gone, clear as birdsong gone. The brickworks have closed down. Their white noise has lifted from the hill, and I can breathe again with ease. An angelus of sorts has called us into silence. A space inside me opens up like the moon at day. The next poem is about the angel of history, as Walter Benjamin called Paul Clay's beautiful, strange drawing, Angelus Novus. And I'll read the second part of that poem called Conversations with the Angel. And just before I do, I don't know if Robert Berrold is in the audience, but if he is, I thank him so much for also reading my manuscript and for leading me to read Raphael Alberti's Conversations with the Angels, which I read after I'd written these poems. Conversations with the Angel. Angelus Novus in the starving light. As a painting of disaster, how could you be so beautiful, soundless behind glass, confined, meaning pruned to a minimum, volume dialed down, dressed for departure? You step from the railway station into a carriage, alone, on your way to a nowhere we haven't yet decided on. The sound of your footsteps remains in the air, and in the air, so much ashen dust it could fill a cooling tower. The wrecking ball weighs black against a blue-veined sky and adds up to a poem about a storm and a loss of consciousness. Angelus Novus, what have you to say about the wrecking ball and all the dust around you? What wordless words fall, fail, flail, flesh fled around you? Wait for me, I'm trying to understand. Can I borrow your vision? Angelus Novus in the still point of the storm, I can't see beyond the next sentence. The cock crows 3 times. Denying you doesn't help one bit. You're still there the next morning with your angel wings around me, your cheeks red hot against mine. You show me your face as if I must take courage from merely seeing you. But what action do you want? And do mere words count? In what country are we now? Is this the world? Sorrow heaped on sorrow, heaped on sorrow, in your dusty wings, the filaments of someone else's faith, the artist's paint, burnt, amber. And still I cannot hear your voice. When I wake, it's morning and no stars shine. Dark river. If I were a bird now, where would I fly? Up, says Psyche, where the air is dark blue and the clouds yellow with fright. So I flew over a bridge to the hidden place by the river. Dark river, I'm here, like Samuel. Dark river, you're blue today, in the light, in the light. You're all surface and fussy with foam on black rock, sliding down, always down. No wonder we're lost here. There was a singing like wind in the wires, as the river rushed past me, rushed through me. Something old, far away. It was a mercy, said the river, but I heard it as mystery and agreed. A mystery strange and alien, composed of prayers and symbols. A mercy that coloured mind, that clouded, occluded pain, made a pattern to cling to, a frieze like a ceiling, an edge to walk along, a way to be contained, to not fall apart, an anatomy of breath, a faith, something inhaled, contentless, light. I quietened myself like a weaned child. What sin have I committed to be made to stay here? What sin? Echoed the river. Why must I stay? Stay, said the river. Step in the water, up to your ankles, said Dark River. Don't cry for the moon, child. Not yet. Be very quiet and put your hand on the strings of the river lute. Still them. Don't move. Turn all your attention to listening. The quiet will teach you. And a voice, there's always a voice, will guide you. Listen, be still. In the silence, the mist, the long breath of the earth curled upward and sideward and down in a green sleeve of summer along the riverbank. In the forest, the past lies coiled up like a spring. Don't touch its wire, its rust, its plenitude. Have I time for one more?
One more would be lovely, thank you.
This one concludes the book, and very grateful to Margaret Strober, for accepting this poem to conclude a new Routledge handbook on drug-related bereavement. I originally struggled to write this poem. I took about 10 years to write it. It was a much longer poem, and one day I cut it off from its moorings and lost the first half, and the second half then fell into the sonnet form that it's now in. Red Angel. She's from the country of angels, I could tell, her shadow behind her like a dark door. Her hands were cupped as if waiting to receive a globe, as if she were about to be Atlas and carry my pain. Hesitant, but finding me, or at least my shadow waiting, she touched my forehead with blessing. It was some kind of comfort in an empty church on a weekday afternoon. No priest she was, and I, no Catholic, had come to light candles. I'm just on an errand, she said, to buy a red bowl. I hold, and she empties my red story of loss, witnessed by birds in the rafters. Outside, as she leaves, her footfall is soundless. Thank you, everybody, for your attention and for being here, and it's lovely to hear you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. What an absolutely beautiful reading. I see comments in the chat that we could go on, and they're really truly beautiful work. And thank you too, Kevin, for your very thoughtful reflection that led us into the right space. I see Anne Carson calling it a kind of dreamlike immersion that you created there, Anne. So thank you so much. Absolutely wonderful.